So, after that, I think it'd be lovely to have some questions. If anyone has any questions, and if they would like it to be answered by any particular speaker, or we can just open it up to the panel and see who would like to answer. We have some roving mics, so do raise your hands if you have a question. We have one over there.
Alan Rayner, thank you all for a wonderful series of talks. I would just like to take up Rosalind's point on art, because in schools today they're so exam-oriented that they've forgotten the creativity side. And in one school, if I may just give a very brief outline of it, after about 70 schools and being on a lifeline because they were so dangerous, I came into this grammar school where I had already gotten into their A stars for RS. And the first lesson I had 4 classes of 120 girls, 30 in each. And I gave them a choice: do you want to be taught in the ordinary way or according to the school of philosophy? But there's a hitch, you have to do what I say. And the 3 things I made them do: the first lesson, silence, that's what I want, do you hear it? The second lesson, I said, the true self on the board, tell me about beautiful, it's wonderful, let me write that down. Third lesson, I said, remember stillness, silence, awareness, the true self, draw the most beautiful thing you can, your mother a flower, but one difference, how Michelangelo and Leonardo were taught: you watch your hands as you do it, the tip of your pencil, and get on with it. They produced stunning work. It went right through the school. And when I thought about it afterwards, I knew it couldn't be me because I was just a supply. I knew that the school teaching was wonderful, but it couldn't be that. And the third thing, I suddenly realized, because 16 years, 17, coming up to me saying, we want that lesson, sir. And I wondered about it, and eventually it dawned on me that for the first time, these girls had seen their true self in their own creativity, and it was a Michelangelo, right through the school. Every girl did her work perfectly.
Fantastic. Have we got any questions for any of the speakers? Thank you.
So my name's Andrew Deakoff. I'm feeling rather embarrassed about my exhibit, which is the latest carbon fibre Mont Blanc, complete with aircraft alloy cap. However, I can't claim to be successful or rich, so I'm just a fraud. So my question is this, and I'll explain a little bit about the background to that question. My question is ambition, or could ambition be a route or a way into spirituality? And my logic goes like this. I'm in business. I'm a business mentor to very senior business leaders, all of whom are infinitely more wealthy than I am, many of whom have more money than they know what to do within their lifetime sensibly. And so leadership is no longer about material wealth, it's about power or maybe something else. And the second thread is that I and many of my colleagues are passionate about this idea of business as a force for good. So as the world gets more discombobulated by climate change and other events, nations will become increasingly unable to do anything about it. And the true global corporations that we have vast potential for good. But unless the leaders connect with something beyond avarice, that's not going to happen. And the third thought is business people do things because they work. They have some profit either for the individual and or for the organisation. And so can we think about spirituality via ambition?
Thank you very much for that question. Would you like to answer it? Yeah, please. Thank you, that's brilliant. I do think formally, of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, if we think about any training course you've ever been on where they show you sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's fairly obvious that you get bored of just stacks of cash and stacks of cars and stacks of suits and things. And these days you can keep going for really quite a long period of time before you bought every handbag in the world and all that kind of thing. But you know, that stuff becomes less attractive because more and more people can afford it. One thing I notice is very interesting is the rise in very competitive corporate philanthropy for that reason. And that can have a sort of slightly dark side, but actually it's fabulous. And I do think that we all get a bit more grown up about it, and you realise those kinds of things don't make you happy. And I do think there is a moment in your life, which I see a lot in the people that come to me at Ashridge, where you get more interested in legacy. And that might be family, but it's often also about, well, what am I really standing for, and what am I going to be proud of? And it won't be the money. I think the only problem is, though, that we can get a bit distracted by the sort of trappings of success. There was a rather horrid study recently about ethics and wealth, rather showing that your ethical ability tends to diminish the wealthier you get. And there was also a link with emotional intelligence diminishing as well. And they thought this was because the richer you get, the more sort of insulated you are from your fellow man, because you're rushing around being so busy in gated communities, in limousines and, you know, with servants and things. You have so many intermediaries, you don't actually meet very many people. You have your circle that you see a lot. And actually you don't need to borrow a cup of sugar from the neighbour or offer to babysit or something, because you've got staff and you've got money. So there's a sort of breakdown in the need to have normal interpersonal relationships with all kinds of people around you. So they think that that is one of the only problems around ambition that is expressed in consumption and the acquisition of material wealth as a marker, that it can just make you distracted and then start retuning your moral compass and making you feel you don't need the spirit because you can have your needs met elsewhere. So I hope for the former. I see it more than the latter, to be honest, and I'm sure the panel will also agree on that.
Thank you very much. Yes, another question.
Jerome Webb, school governor. And the question really comes from the point of view of education and children. From my observation, both parent and a governor, and looking at society, there is a lot of acceptance towards ambition, and that's accepted and people are encouraged. Spirituality, I think in the last 10, 20 years, there's been a shift towards acceptance of spiritual life. Where there seems to be confusion is with religion. And I just wonder what the panel thought about this, because of the recent example of the Odeon banning the advert, including the Lord's Prayer. And what message are we as a society sending out to our children about the right to express a spiritual life and being ambitious about that?
So the question about the leading a spiritual life and being open about that and ambitious about that, absolutely. Would like to answer that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to whether you believe you have a soul. I just think, and when I say a soul, I mean a hinterland, I mean another dimension, I mean something that is beyond your mind, beyond your body, and I think the more we can get in touch with that sense of our souls, of our individual souls, if you like. It has to start with the individual, of actually when you feel most yourself, what it is you can do, that you feel that soul connection, whether it is, and it's often the most simplest things. I think let's start with that. Let's start with discovering our souls.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to answer that question also?
I think you're right. We're in a muddle about religion versus spirituality. I had a very bizarre conversation with one of the editors of Harvard Business Review about this several years ago. I wanted to give them a piece on organisational spirituality, as it was then called. And he had a sort of panic attack. It was very odd. And he started quoting the Constitution at me. And it was really interesting. I was trying to explain that in the American academic literature, they have a sort of rule, which is you can discuss spirituality, but you can't discuss religion unless you're doing sort of ethnographic studies and that kind of thing, because there needs to be an absolute distinction between the two. The assumption being spirituality, we love it, religion, wars and bombing and hideousness, which of course is unhelpful and doesn't really teach anybody anything apart from confusion. And I fear that that's what we're now importing in the UK, is we've decided religion is negative, a bad brand. So if we just go on about spirituality, then we can all live in peace and harmony. But we all know that religions are just expressions of particular spiritualities, and we can't duck that. We do need to have grown-up conversations about what it means to live together when you don't believe the same things. And you can't just sort of net that out and say we've all got souls, because we've all got different beliefs about what our souls are, if we have them or not, and what we're here for, and what our bodies are for, and all those kinds of things. And also what the end of our life is about, and what sacrifices we might make in suicide bombings, for instance, on that front. So I do think there's something really interesting about the extent to which we are able to curate safe spaces for children to learn about religious difference well, rather than just airbrushing it out of the curriculum, hoping nobody notices. We've had some very interesting, as a Board of Governors, the PREVENT legislation, you'll know, is now a statutory responsibility for all of us. So at our last board meeting, we had a discussion about that, because we have quite an international community at Gordonstoun. It's always been about a third international students. And there was one boy who had been flagged as having accessed some sort of jihadi websites. And so there'd been a conversation with him about what that was about. And he said, well, to be honest, the West have been bombing our countries for years. Do you think we were going to just forget about it? It's a good point. And actually, we do need to be able to allow everybody to talk about what they've inherited in their culture, in their religion, where they're from, and try and figure that out in a grown-up way rather than just hoping that it'll all go away. So I agree, it's a real dilemma. Thank you.
Jeremy, would you like to say something?
For my sins, I'm on the board of a charity called the Tony Blair Faith Foundation. In fact, I'm the chairman. And the idea of that is to encourage faiths not to kill each other. And the reason why I'm personally interested in it is that I think unless faiths prove that they're good, they will die. And they deserve to die. Faith needs to be recognised for what it is. It needs to do good works in the name of its God. And until that happens, we're going to get war and war and war. And Tony Blair's vision, I think, was extraordinary. Many years ago, when he was still in Number 10, he saw that the future was religious wars, which is where we now are. And so our job, I think, as anyone who's interested in anything spiritual, has got to be to draw the best out of every religion. I'll give you an example. We live in Europe, and Europe is a predominantly Christian continent. We forget this. We say we are multinational, multiracial, multi-denominational. This is a Christian continent. Now that should govern our behaviour towards people trying to come to Europe. We should be Christian towards the rest of mankind. But we should know we're doing it in a Christian spirit. Now, my view is that those that come need to recognise they're coming to Christendom. It's a simple word. People need to know that this is Christendom. That's why it's successful, because people here have obeyed the laws of Christ and the laws that led up the Judaic laws as well. But this is primarily recognition of what is there. If people don't recognise it, it leads to division and all the rest of it. So I think it's very important, because as a governor, we're both on the same governors of the same school, is that we teach the importance and the power of religion at its best.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you to all three speakers. I thought Rosalind was excellent, but I'm biased as I'm her husband. The question is to Jeremy. Ambition can be individual and by its nature limited, or universal and unlimited. The question is, how can the ambition of any action, however small it is, include the welfare of all? If that makes sense.
So how can the ambition of
Yes.
any any task, however small it is,
How can it be universal?
how can it be universal?
You must have noticed the less you do, the better things go. So that when you're really playing cricket at its best, when you're playing tennis at its best, you're not there. So the ambition in any project is to allow that project to proceed without your presence, without your help. And if you're not there, it is universal. It's the identification with the individual that makes the action personal and selfish. So the view here is that the less you do, the better, and the greater the ambition. The ambition primarily is not to be individual. Make sense?
Very succinct answer, thank you. Yes.
My name is Chris Rees. A number of the speakers have spoken of ambition as related to the goal, to the end. But I remember, Jeremy, a weekend when you suggested that we all ignore the end and focus entirely on the means. How do you manage this tension between means and end in the context of this conversation?
Is there any particular speaker you'd like to answer that? Open it up to them.
I think when you have an idea, well, when I have an idea, it comes really clearly. And it's almost like a sort of visual spark. And if I was to freeze frame that, it would be brilliant because everything would be there. But that's like the initial intention to start. And then you carry on. Then you embark on this process, on this journey. And so much can happen on that journey. So many unexpected things can happen on that journey. If you were completely fixated on that first vision, then you would miss the incidental happenings. And I always, for instance, when I get a commission, the client will have an idea, and we'll talk a lot about what that idea could be, or what the qualities that they want that commission to be. But it's very important to go through this stage of just keeping it completely open so that the process can just take you in all sorts of areas. And then it just happens along the way that you put your boundaries in, you put your markers in, and the thing takes the course of its own. So that's what I would say. You have this first idea, but then you have to let it just go on its own journey and see where it'll end. I don't know if that helps.
Just a quick thing on that. I do really hear this as a struggle because I do feel it's about holding both lightly and intention. So in strategy, they often talk about a difference between, getting a boat and going to Calais for lunch. There might be somebody swimming the channel or a boat or something, but generally you've got a map and you can kind of get there and you've got some euros and whatever and you can get on with it. As opposed to trying to discover the Northwest Passage, where you've kind of got an idea it's kind of west and maybe northish, and you need to focus an awful lot on the capacity in your boat. You need some chaps who are quite flexible, you need to be able to cope with hot conditions and wet conditions, and you need lines for scurvy and a whole load of things that may or may not be useful to you, you don't know yet. And if you get to the middle of the ocean and there's nothing there, you need to figure out what you're going to do next. So there's something about constantly checking that the ends aren't becoming so important in and of themselves that any means will do to get you there. Neither do you want the means to become so important that you sacrifice the end because you've got sort of obsessed with the means and the journey rather than the destination. So I'm constantly trying to keep both in tension in parallel and keeping each other honest, really, to make sure that they're in balance, if that helps.
Yes, thank you very much. The question relates to your point about needing to get the spiritual dimension to young people, to get it early enough in the cycle. And I've been working in some areas where they're using values as the language, as the spiritual language, because they can't speak so much about religion. And I'd like to know what your view is about using this, values which are natural to all of us: compassion, courage, generosity. I've even visited some schools in India where the government has made everything very secular, and so they can't speak of anything religious or spiritual. But they are looking at values. What do you think about that?
I suppose I worry about the neutrality and relativity of the word value because it has become valueless in overuse. But I know what you're talking about, and I do think that seems to be a very healthy way in to get people to surface belief systems that they hold. I'm still a fan of virtue, because I think people instinctively get that isn't something that is neutral. Virtue is supposed to be a positive thing. Values are supposed to be valuable, but they don't seem to be. And we know from corporate values that they sort of change quite often and get dropped and picked up and all that kind of stuff. So people have lost faith in values, I think. What I notice is that in some of the alternative primary school curricula, introducing philosophy earlier on is really helpful, because you can use philosophy and metaphysics as a very, quote, secular way into talking about the hinterland, the other, what else is there, and allowing people to notice that these are all habits of thought, and that we can unthink them. Other people have thought differently, other people will always think differently, and being more practiced at thinking, as well as trying to help people surface the design assumptions they have too around their belief systems.
Yes, I've listened to what's been said about ambition, and I wonder if we're trying to make the word ambition mean something that really is about vision. The example of this church, my question really is about Christopher Wren and the great architects. Before they could put this into operation, they would have had a vision. And it seems to me that vision is something which is very much inherent in the individual soul, if you like. The ambition seems to be, and this is my question to you, is it not an addition to that vision? I'll just give you a couple of examples. I run a business, and running that business, I have a vision of what that business should do, what it should aspire to, which is to give service, the best service it can, and serve the community to make a reasonable profit and so on. My wife, interestingly, from Eva's experience, wanted to get pregnant many years ago. And what she recognised, I'm sorry she's not here, but she will verify this, that the moment she gave out that idea, I had nothing to do with it, of course, but once she'd given that idea up, she became pregnant. She gave that ambition up. And the question also is about Justice Day. You see, you must have a vision of Justice Day. What it does for me, I don't know if it does for anyone else, I hope it does, it just reminds me. It reminds me of what I am, something of what I am, what I really am, in the sense of being a spirit. And I can't say that's an ambition. It's a vision. And I think it's a wonderful vision. And perhaps we can extend it to every single day. But that's my question. I think, is it not so that when we look at it carefully, we're trying to make ambition take the place of vision?
So the question being, are we trying to make ambition take the place of vision, having a vision for business or for life? Who would like to answer that question?
You have a vision, that's good. I think you need a mechanism to realise it, and that I would call ambition. Vision is no good if it's sitting behind a picture frame. It needs to be in action. And what gets it into action is ambition. Gives an emotion behind it. But I do agree, a vision is good. Yeah, helps you see where you're going. But you do need to get up and go. And that's the ambition.
Could I add something brief about another way of redefining ambition, which has been occurring to me as we've been talking, which is about quality. There's something about, you could have an unambitious vision, and it's about balancing this means and ends, the journey and the destination, so that not only is it a quality orientation you're heading towards, but that the way in which you approach that is full of quality, so that you're ambitious for yourself in relation to how you are going to achieve that vision.
Hello. Just like to say thank you all very much for a lovely evening. Really enjoyed the talks. I'd just like to talk about briefly the impression of religion upon younger people today, and how religion can be accepted by younger people or maybe not accepted, and it partly due to today's world events, which are, there's lots of violence in the world, as you know. And I'd like to just go back to Jeremy Sinclair's talk about Christian values earlier on in Europe. And I know you mentioned Tony Blair and the Christian values. My question is, do you feel that maybe religion is being muddied with the world's desire for resources? Because my concern is that some of the world's wars these days are perceived by the media and by world leaders as done for the force of good. This is a battle between good and evil. And my concern is that the thirst for resources, especially in the Middle East with the oil, is actually being muddied by these so-called values for goodness in society. We're going into for the good to defeat evil, whereas in actual fact a lot of these wars tend to be about the oil. And there's a protest, in the world of protests these days, there's a saying which goes, an eye for an eye makes everyone blind. And my concern is the more wars we have with Muslims or Muslims and Christians and vice versa, or whoever else, we're just turning everybody blind.
Thank you very much. Would you have any particular speaker who you'd like to direct that to? Jeremy, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we'll all go blind if we poke each other's eyes out. I'm with you on that. I come back to the point I was touching on earlier, is that I think religions have a tremendous duty. They have to prove their worth. And they have to prove their worth by loving mankind. They have to open their doors to people who don't believe in them. They have to serve the world. And as they don't, they will, rightly, in my view, disappear. Because the Western current is against religion, as various people have mentioned. And so it's got to prove its worth. Now, I think there's another side to it that needs to be done, which is research needs to be done that encourages people to have faith. You'll live longer, you're less likely to get divorced, you're less likely to have an abortion. All the good things in life that keep people happy are more likely to happen if they have faith. Now, somebody needs to make these arguments. But if it's just a camouflage for an argument about oil, it deserves to go. The nature of the creation is that things, when they cease to have a purpose, crumble. As this will do if we don't look after it and clean it and all the rest of it. It should crumble. Otherwise there'd be no space for anything else. And so religions will crumble unless they serve humanity, in my view. And we also, part of that is them making the case for faith itself.
I sort of both agree and disagree with that, because I do think there is something around ambition trumping spirituality in some of these realms. There's a lovely bit in one of Shakespeare's plays about Richard II, and about he stands no chance against Bolingbroke, because Bolingbroke will bring a soldier, and for every soldier Henry has an angel. And I think the problem is, if you have an ambition and you use your religion to fuel it, to make sure you will never give up, then you are unbeatable. But then whose God are you really serving, ambition or spirituality there? And I think I agree with you, that's where we see often conflicts which are fairly ordinary and tedious and childish about resource being turned into some grand mission in order to justify them and prolong them.
Yes?
Yes. I would like to be impolite, but since I'm a Dutchman, I can be more open than most of the people here. And secondly, because I've devoted the second part of my life after business career helping people to find their way in the world. And I always think of Emerson, who says, the talent is the call. Each man has a vocation. The talent is the call. And now my impolite side is that I ask each of the three on the platform whether they have searched for their talent, actually doing full justice to their talent, because that is the call, that's the vocation. Whether they are doing that already, or whether they are promising that they will do that in the future.
Fantastic. Roz, would you like to go first on that one?
Thanks. I agree. I think it's about discovering what you love. And I think you need to do that every single day. I think you need to connect in some way, again with your soul, do something for your soul every day. And that's totally to do with love, and I think it's a little bit to do with talent as well. So yes, every day. I try.
I think my talent is that I have no patience with people who make things very complicated. So I like to make things simple again. Whether it's about boiling all of theology down to a 2x2 matrix or destroying capitalism in 7 chapters. Whenever I see people being frightened off by experts telling them that they should go away and leave it to the grown-ups, then I like to wade in and try and make things simple again. So that's what I'm about.
I'm going to leave the question as to whether I've found my talent to God. At the end of the day, he can decide whether what I did was a good use of the cards that he dealt me. But I'll tell you my favourite card is a word, words. I'm a writer, so I live by words. I see people fall into trouble by words. There's a recent example, a recent history in this country. The last government Labour government, got us into huge financial deficit, huge debts. And their simple misuse of words. Instead of calling spending spending, they call it investment. Ah, what a wonderful thing spending is. It's suddenly become investment. And there's no limit to that. Always a good investment. And then, of course, there was a crisis followed on this, and they called it a credit crunch. Remember the credit crunch? Rubbish. It was a debt crisis. You change the word, you change the world. So the words are the key. Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, right there.
Good evening. My name is Elias Whitworth, and what I have found.
Can you
during
please, sorry, keep the mic very close to your mouth. It's hard
what
to
I
hear.
have found recently that religions, all of them, are man-made. There are no divine. And as God is one, so is His message to the whole of humanity. And therefore there is contradiction in between an existence of plenty different religions and one God and His message to the humanity. So my ambition is to design within a special, proper way, obviously, and procedure, to design the one divine law for the whole of humanity. You can call it religion, but I don't want anyone to misunderstood divine law with religion, because religion can be multiplied and there will be an existence of many religions which contradict each other, in between each other. But divine law, like domestic law within a country, should serve for the whole of humanity as God is one, so is His message. And this is my ambition, to create such one divine law for the whole of humanity. I have designed a website, which is eliaswhitworth.com, in order to implement this concept to the reality. It is pretty difficult so far. My steps are very little, if so even. But my question to all three speakers is this ambition too big? Is this ambition not realistic? Is there something wrong about this ambition? Thank you.
Thank you.
All three speakers, please.
I think it's a fabulous ambition. I suppose I have a question about why. In that I have a rather basic understanding of religion, I think, which is if there is one true God, which is what I believe, why would God not let down a whole host of different ladders to help us get back to Him? And depending on where you were born in the world, in which generation, and in which context, in which tribe, why would those ladders not all be different? Some short, some long, some rickety, some smooth, I don't know. I don't have a problem with the kind of coexistence, theologically speaking. It doesn't affect my God, because God is not affected by our belief. I think the fabulous Terry Pratchett once wrote a book called Small Gods, where the size of the god was directly proportional to the number of followers they had. So they had some really massive gods, and then they had a few squeaking in the desert because no one believed in them anymore. And I think sometimes we're so furiously trying to defend our God by having the biggest one great mammoth mergers and acquisitions of all the religions. I'm not sure God's very interested in that. I think God's interested in the quality of our relationship with God. And I think within all the religions we are a resource to try and figure out how, as religions, we can see the different ladders reach across and try and understand what it is we're all up to. Because I think you're right. I think there is something true at the heart. I don't know if we need to do too much artificial meshing of it, though. But if you can, it would be brilliant.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. I think we need to wrap up, and I think we'll finish with a moment of silence again. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've heard some fantastic answers to the question about spirituality and ambition and their connection with each other. We've heard about intention, and we've heard about giving the same emphasis to the means as well as to the end, and how the spiritual really always combines with ambition, and they support each other in our journey in life. I'd just like to just finish this evening by thanking all the speakers who've given their time this evening, the musicians, and of course Elizabeth Edmonds for creating this event for us, and also to the church and to the people who run the church and who've been so kind in helping us to set up this evening. So thank you very much all, to you as well, for coming this evening and hearing the speakers. Thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. Thank you.